Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt in Studio Beltway. As promised throughout the show today, my old friend Terry Pluto joins us. Terry is not a political guy. He's a sports writer. He's the dean of Cleveland Sports Writers. But every now and then, a story shakes the entire country that has its epicenter in Cleveland. That happened this weekend with Shedeur Sanders going to the Browns. So I thought I'd check in with the dean of Cleveland Sports, Terry Pluto, for his reaction to the Browns taking Shedeur. Hello, Terry.
You know, dean is a nice way of saying somebody's really old.
I know. I'm the dean of the Salem Radio Network broadcaster, so I'm used to that too. Yeah.
I know, academic world, I know dean's a big deal, but yeah. So where are we now, Shedeur Sanders?
Yeah. Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you resigned?
I mean, basically, if you could say, well, it's a fifth-round pick, the contract's going to be barely guaranteed. If they don't like him, they can cut him tomorrow. That's true of most fifth-round picks. But the thing that I sometimes get a little bit weary of is quarterback drama in Cleveland. And it just seems like they are so hopelessly addicted to it. That it really becomes a thing here. Hugh, I get a ton of feedback on this. I'm like hearing myself.
Oh, that's because of Dwayne. You know, I've never had a producer on this radio show and television show, Terry. So Dwayne sometimes get things wrong at the beginning, but we'll get it fixed in the course of this.
Okay, that's fine. Just because, you know, all right. I mean, yeah. You've had feedback yourself, you know. All right, I'll just try to plow through it. What are we talking about? I'm sorry, Hugh.
You were talking about the fact that we've had so much drama, really, since Bill Belichick came to Cleveland in the 90s, that this is just the latest episode of the soap opera that is the Browns.
Well, let's look at, first of all, the Sanders story is unique. I mean, this is a guy that from high school on has only played for his father, Deion Sanders, the great defensive back in the NFL, actually even played some baseball too, professional baseball. He was his offensive coordinator, Shedeur's offensive coordinator in high school, and then later was the head coach at both Jackson State and then at Colorado. Shedeur played there. So Shedeur comes out, goes in the draft, and do you know who his agent was, Hugh Hewitt?
No, I don't.
It's his dad.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, now you're on. See, I think this is where he probably was a second or third round talent. I know some people had him rated higher than that, but that's probably where he was. And on top of that, you have a clue how much money he made last year between NIL and commercial deals and so on, because there's a couple reports. Take a guess.
$3 million?
Oh, 6.
Oh, dear. Okay. Well, Terry, I figured he dropped because I listened to your podcast, Terry's Talking, and I listened to you and Dave Campbell every week. And for at least a month, it's every Tuesday or Thursday, at least a month you've been saying, Travis Hunter's got great stats. He only dropped 6 balls out of 96 thrown to him, and he always had to come back to the ball. And you said that again and again and again. I kept thinking, I wonder if Shedeur's got the arm. And so when they drafted Dillon Gabriel, I thought that's a backup quarterback. You know, they make money for you. You can trade him for a 5th-round draft choice. He can play there for 4 or 5 years and then move on. But when they went to Shedeur, maybe it really is a lottery ticket.
Yeah, it is. And when you think about Travis Hunter and how gifted he is, part of the reason Shedeur looked good and his stats looked good is he was throwing to the best receiver in college football. One of the most remarkable athletes I have seen. And as you mentioned, on some of those long passes, oftentimes Hunter was coming back to the ball, jumping over 2 defenders to catch it. Now, this is not totally to dismiss what Shedeur was doing, but I think it helped his stats and to have a great receiver. Like when Johnny Manziel was at Texas A&M, he was throwing a lot to a guy named Mike Evans, who is become a star in the NFL. Of course, Johnny's long gone. That's one thing to keep in mind. And then secondly, I do think that the Deion and his family really just misjudged this whole NFL project. they messed up in terms of the whole process for the draft. You know, when you're a quarterback, they're looking at your leadership, maturity, and all that kind of stuff. And the big mistake was he came in acting like he was already a first-round pick.
Yeah, it was very unfortunate. Don't go anywhere, Terry. We're going to take a break for the network. I'm going to come right back and play. This will be right after the break. America, don't go anywhere. I'm talking with Terry Pluto. You can listen to Terry talking on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow him at Terry Pluto and sign up for his newsletter over at cleveland.com. Find the blue bar, look up Terry Pluto. I get it every week. I listen to Terry talking every week. You should too. Stand by. I'm back now with Terry Pluto because this weekend the country was absorbed in the fall, the free fall of Shedeur Sanders, one of the most high-profile college football players in America, down to the fifth round when Andrew Berry gave him a safety net to fall into. That's the general manager of the Cleveland Browns. And all of a sudden, Cleveland's, if you had looked at the draft board a week ago, Terry, and told me we're going to get Mason Graham, Shedeur Sanders, the kid from Bowling Green, the UCLA linebacker, plus Judkins, plus the kid from Tennessee, I just said, are you drinking? Are you smoking something? Because that's ideal. But the way that it happened, Cleveland fans are left and the NFL's left scratching its head.
In a couple of ways. I mean, number one is they did have a chance to trade Travis Hunter. They passed on it. And the Browns get mad at me. Every time I bring this up, I ask the question directly to Andrew Berry. What was part of the reason that you made that trade, trading your number 2 pick for the number 5 pick and then another first rounder, some other draft picks, because you traded 3 first rounders and other stuff for Deshaun Watson. And Eli said that had nothing to do with it. Okay, fine. That's what they said. But it's wrong. They're still trying to dig themselves out from that. And that's exactly the quote that owner Jimmy Haslam said when he said that going after Deshaun Watson was, quote, a big swing and a miss. And he goes, and we need to dig ourselves out. Well, that trade was one way to dig themselves out. Now, they've drafted some really interesting players. Like you said, Mason Graham, a defensive tackle from Michigan. Judkins, Quinshon Judkins, was really an excellent running back in the SEC, first with Mississippi and then later in the Big Ten with Ohio State. I just think that they're making progress in a lot of different areas. Sampson was the leading rusher in the SEC at Tennessee. They took 2 running backs. They took Dylan Gabriel, which to me was an odd pick as a quarterback in the 3rd round, which made me think, okay, they're out of the Shedeur Sanders market. And then they came back and I guess they decided, well, we might as well just take a shot at him, sort of the Shedeur Sanders scratch-off ticket and see how it goes and bring him in. But, with the Browns, they just always have this feeling that can they ever get anything right for very long? Hugh, they've not had back-to-back winning seasons since the late 80s. No, we're not talking about back-to-back championships or back-to-back playoff appearances or just 2 seasons in a row where they won more than they lost. In fact, it was 4 in a row. That was back in the Bernie Kosar era from your home area. And then that's been it. It's almost impossible in the NFL to design that sort of ineptitude.
Well, you know what I like, Terry? I like the fact that I was watching on NFL. Most people watch some of the draft. And when they cut away to Stefanski and Berry, Jimmy's in the 2nd row. Stefanski and Berry are drafting like confident guys. They're not drafting like desperate guys who've got to win this year. They're drafting like it's a 13-month draft. And I like that.
Yep.
Do you think Haslam has figured out this is a pretty good front office? Maybe I'll leave him alone?
I hope so. How so much can change in 12 months? Because a year ago at this time, the Browns were coming off an 11-6 season, making the playoffs. Joe Flacco, came to their rescue and led them, was comeback player of the year. Stefanski was coach of the year. Jim Schwartz, the defensive coordinator, was assistant of the year. I mean, he just went on. I think Myles Garrett was defensive player of the year. everything was smiles and bright. And then they went 3-14, and all kinds of things went sideways. The good thing was, I believe Jimmy Haslam, who usually would react to something like 3-14 by firing everyone. I think he had two things going on. One, he's trying to get a dome stadium built, and he's fighting with the city of Cleveland and some other things with that, so he's busy. And I think secondly, by keeping Stefanski and Barry together, was an admission on his part that at least at the end, he was the one that pushed for the Deshaun Watson disastrous trade. And I'm not going to hold these guys responsible for something that I greenlighted. So I give him credit for that. But I'm also
when you and Dave Campbell talk about it, I know some people are tired of hearing about it, but if they'd even opened up the door a little bit 4 years ago and asked just some normal people, what do you think about this deal? They would have broken the blue bubble or whatever, the orange bubble that they were in, and everyone would have said, are you out of your mind? It is the worst trade in professional sports history, as far as I can tell. Maybe Babe Ruth to the Yankees is worse, but it's a franchise record when the counterfactual, and I'll give you a minute on this and then we'll come back, is sit Baker Mayfield when he got hurt and everything would be fine in Cleveland right now.
Mm-hmm. Very possible. Because the thing that you make bad trades sometimes, you think this guy can play, turns out he can't. But when they brought in Deshaun Watson, who actually has settled more civil cases for sexual behavior than he started games for the Browns. I mean, that's a fact. He started only 19 games. I mean, who wants that on your record? And you bought into that knowing that stuff like that was coming, a big suspension. You knew that Browns fans, especially some female fans that I know very well, I mean, they were just in tears. I'm not kidding you when they traded for him, much less giving up all those 6 draft picks and everything else. It was horrible, and it is something to dig their way out of.
It is. My brother-in-law reminds me of it maybe on a weekly basis, and that's because it will forever be a stain on the reputation of the Browns. But the good news is, I've never seen a more resilient fan group. We're about the same age. I don't know of any other fan base that's more resilient than the Browns. And so they're investing as we speak in Shedeur. Maybe not so wisely, but they're investing in him. Poor Dylan Gabriel must be wondering what happened. But now he's QB4.
Well, I bet all those guys, Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco. Now, to be fair, this is nothing like the Watson trade or nothing like when they drafted Johnny Manziel in the first round. The 5th-round pick really is a football lottery ticket, and most of the contract he signs won't be guaranteed. His 4-year contract will be worth less than the $6 million that he made last year at Colorado. And out of that probably $4 million 4-year contract, maybe $250,000 or $350,000 is guaranteed. It's nice money that you and me do, but for that guy, it's just picking up a dollar off the table.
It's quite a come down. Terry Pluto, stand by. I'll be right back, and America will put it all together on the podcast as well, so don't miss that. I got to talk to Terry about the Cavaliers, who may be the best basketball team in the country right now, because believe it or not, stuff happens in Cleveland. I'm back with Terry Pluto. Terry, I did want to get a word in with you about the Cavaliers because I listen to Chris Fedor and Jimmy Watkins and sometimes Ashley. I listen to you and Dave Campbell, and I think to myself, are they really that good? Because I don't know basketball. I just watch basketball as a fan, and I really don't understand half of what people are saying on the podcast. But they're a lot of fun to watch, and they're homegrown. And dare we hope?
Oh, sure. Because the team won a title, possibly. Do they deserve to be in discussion of winning a title? Absolutely. And then you look at the way they have, as you said, homegrown. No big free agents come in for money. It's not LeBron coming back to rescue him as he did a second time and let him do a title. That Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen, 2 of their key players, came in like regular trades. And then the Evan Mobley and Darius Garland were draft picks, and the other guys are kind of role players. They had a very good coach in J.B. Bickerstaff, who took them out of the wilderness of losing 60 games and got them into the playoffs. And they felt he was kind of stalled, and they let J.B. go. And they brought in Kenny Atkinson, who changed just a few things with the same players, and they won 64 games. And they're rolling through the early round of the playoffs. Absolutely, they're worth it. As you mentioned, this is like the opposite of the Browns. It's like drama free. It's easy to understand, how they're doing business, and it's just, for me as a sports writer, it's a relief to go there and talk about these guys, and to say, look, Donovan Mitchell, that was a big trade. They traded a bunch of draft picks and things to bring him in, but he came in from Utah with a sparkling record of making an all-star team every year he played, and also of his character and actions off the court. And he came into Cleveland. He played here a couple of years, signed an extension to stay in Cleveland. I mean, like the Guardians have Jose Ramirez, who's, their trademark guy who wanted to stay, didn't play into the, Cleveland, you don't want to be there thing. Well, the same thing for Donovan Mitchell. And that's why both of those franchises are just so much fun for me to report on and to talk about.
Yeah, we like good guys. You and I both. You report on them. I listen to you report on them. Jose Ramirez, Steve Kwan, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen actually says things like holy molasses. We like good guys who are not trouble off the field or off the court. They're just good guys doing good things with their abilities and trying to raise people up. We like that, and it's really wonderful. Now, I got to close by asking you about Earl Weaver. I love your Earl Weaver stories. I walked past Jim Palmer in a restaurant in Newport Beach, and we ended up texting each other. He's still calling games for the Orioles?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I talked to him when Baltimore came in to Cleveland.
Yeah, so I find it amazing. He's 80 years old, and he's calling ball games for the Orioles. But your Earl Weaver stories are delightful, and I wanted to ask you about when he could have burned you as a young kid, and he didn't. Did he do that with all the young reporters or just you?
Oh, I know that, like Dan Shaughnessy, who's now in the Hall of Fame, a great writer for the Boston Globe, he was the same thing. Earl mentored him. I think early on he might have been a little tougher on some of the beat guys, but he figured out if he would teach us how to see the game through his eyes, which was much different than how other people were playing it. Earl was sort of the early stat guy and kind of invented his own analytics, and he ruined me for everybody after that. And then, now look, if you had written something that he didn't like, I mean, he might rip into you one day, but the next day, it's like it didn't happen. The players would say the same thing. But in terms of, like, for example, he hated when you would go out and tell a pitcher, pitch around this guy, don't throw him the strike. And he would always say, if you tell that guy, like, don't throw him a strike, he's liable to throw it right down the middle. It's like, don't think about the blue elephant. Don't think about the blue elephant. He always say, managers, I'm not like Billy Martin, that would be exact quote. I have guts enough to tell him just intentionally walk the guy. He had all these sayings, like he hated the hit and run play. He goes, well, you have a you have a base runner who's running while looking over his shoulder to see if the guy's swinging, and then you have a guy swinging at a pitch you may normally not swing at because the guy's running on the hit and run. You want to steal the base, steal the base. Just these simple things. Now think about that. That's 1979. I could go verbatim, word after word. It was like going to baseball finishing school for me.
Yeah, well, I think it's always dip into your Earl Weaver set of stories. I want to close with this, Terry. I don't know if you watched the draft on the third day. Jerry Kramer came out in a wheelchair. And I immediately thought, Jerry Kramer wrote a couple of books about his Vince Lombardi days and the Super Bowl Browns. In that era of sports books, there was Jerry Kramer, Johnny Sample, the Jets, Joe Namath, I can't wait until tomorrow because I get better looking every day, and an iconic book called Ball 4. But I think Jerry Kramer's and Ball 4 were the two that really set up sports publishing. Was there anyone before that really told us there was a game with inside the game that's worth knowing about?
Yeah, there was a guy named Jim Bronson who pitched for the Reds in the early 60s. And he wrote kind of G-rated ball for, but it took it really did take you into the locker room. And I think pennant race or something. The last name is Bronson. That would have been it. Actually, I got to know Boughton in 1978. I was a minor league baseball writer for the Savannah Morning News. That was a Double-A team for the Braves. And Boughton, at the age of 39, was trying to make a comeback throwing the knuckleball. And I got to know. In fact, the first book I wrote was called The Greatest Summer, was about Boughton's comeback in that. And he helped me a lot with in terms of like being an author and that. So I have a great debt to Jim Boughton. Very, very clever and very, very funny.
Oh, that book was hilarious. And it was a little bit risque. So for a teenager in the 60s, it was somewhat interesting. Yeah. But I want to close by telling people this. I was talking with Chuck Todd, who's forgotten more about sports than I know. And I mentioned that Terry is an acquaintance, and he said, loose balls. And I mean, Terry, that was out of nowhere. I'd never even heard of loose balls. And does that happen to you a lot?
Yeah, and that's probably the book I wrote on the ABA. They always say, well, the definitive book on the ABA is Loose Balls by Pluto. I'm like, of course it is. It's the only book on the ABA. I'll take the praise. But it's been around. It's my best-selling book. It came out in 1989, and people still read it, as you said, like Chuck Todd and that. And because the ABA was just a wild, wild league. It was a league that brought in the three-point shot. It was a league that kind of brought in the, shall we say, livelier cheerleaders that from back in the day, and all kinds of strange type of promotions,
red,
including
blue ball.
Red, white, and blue ball, all because George Mikan, who was the commissioner, had very bad eyes. And Mikan said, when I see that ball on TV for the NBA it's just this gray thing, because remember, it's mostly black and white. He said, but when I see our ball, where the American Basketball Association, be red, white, and blue, people want to stand up and salute. I don't know about that, but I had a red, white, and blue ball as a kid. I just liked the colors.
Yeah, it worked. It really did work. Terry, I appreciate your taking time with me. Biggest story of the weekend in Cleveland with Shedeur Sanders, and I appreciate your being available. I look forward to tomorrow's breakdown and to find out what's happened with Clase coming out of the bullpen. But I'll wait for tomorrow's Terry's Talking podcast, which is for anyone who likes their sports served up with a good side helping of perspective, because that's what I get from you and Dave. Hey, Terry, thank you so much.
Thanks, Hugh. Appreciate it, Hugh.
You too.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.